And hi, everyone. We are live now. Welcome to another live edition of Real Talk produced by Let's Talk America Radio. Of course, I am Shana and I am your host. And we are so excited to be on with you today, just making sure that we are live, and certainly looks like we are. And we are here to highlight some trending topics and people you want to know more about. And today is no exception. I'm super excited to highlight an important trending topic for so many people. And we are talking about election anxiety. That's right, I said it. We're going to talk about it. Of course, here on Let's Talk America Radio, we're an objective show. We give you the information and we let you make your own decisions, of course. But we certainly want to address this because there's a lot of anxiety going on about this upcoming presidential election. No matter what side you're on, if you're on the blue side or the red side, or you're somewhere down the middle, or you haven't made your mind up yet, you cannot certainly escape that there's been so much going on and so much chatter about the presidential election, where I'm no expert, but I'm super excited that tonight we have on with us on the Sunday evening, the one and only Karen Howard. Karen is on with us. She's written an amazing book, a best-selling book. She's got a lot of experience on politics on both sides. And we're going to talk political election anxiety tonight. Karen, of course, I've seen your resume. It's super impressive. But share with us in 1 minute or less with our audience of your background and what brought you here to really talk about election anxiety and why it's so important for you.
First, I can thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I mean, I love this topic just because it does affect so many people's lives. And I came here over 40 years ago. Can't believe it's been that, as a congressional staffer on the Republican side. So I stayed in politics for many years in terms of working on the Hill and being a lobbyist, and switched parties. So I've been on both sides of that fence, and I've been working in a Congress where people work to get along and make progress. And I have watched everything that has transpired over the past many years. So for me, it's really important that the teachings that I have had the benefit of learning can help people deal with what's going on in the election, because we can't avoid it. We shouldn't avoid it. And yet, for over 8 years, we've been dealing with this sort of stress at the dinner table, the Thanksgiving table. It's been really overwhelming for a lot of families. And there have been conversations, and there have been places where you can't have conversations. So I'm hopeful today that your listeners will have some takeaways to be able to manage the conversations and keep the stress level down and understand the power of language.
Yeah, and so important. Language, I call it rhetoric, Karen. There's so much to talk about when it comes to the upcoming presidential election. We certainly want to point out that there are other elections going on that may fall with it as well. Some local, state, and also municipalities as well. I will say this, we don't take a political stand here on Let's Talk America podcast, but I certainly do encourage people to certainly exercise their right to vote. And I would say not just on the presidential side that gets a lot of the international and national news, but I will also certainly say for those lesser sensational or not as well covered from the media perspective when the municipality elections too, please pay attention to that. I will say that because those are so important. Tonight, if you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, please get your questions in. We have Karen Howard on with us. She is a political guru in certainly a large sense. And we want to address the election anxiety that so many people have on. We're not going to be on long, but we want your opinion, your feedback, and we'll kick it off of perhaps if you give your opinion. Why do you think this election has so many people on edge? Now, we know there are lots of presidential elections that have taken place. Karen, you and I both have seen multiple presidential elections, but I will say from the pop culture side of it, it seems like this particular one certainly has people very definitive on how they feel, and also some emotions and feelings come with that. So if you're watching us right now, I do encourage you to put your information in the chat if you've got a question or just your opinion, if you will. Of course, this is a friendly and a safe space. That's exactly what Let's Talk America podcast and radio aims to do. So we would, of course, we know we're talking politics, but please, we ask that you be courteous to all, but tell us your opinion why you think this particular presidential election has so many people on edge. You know, Karen, I want to get right to a very important part of this conversation. And I've got to ask what I'm asking the listeners right now, those viewing us. Why do you think this presidential election seems to be so definitive in emotions and feelings? And you and I both know we've got about 70 days left of campaigning that they're going to do. But do you think social media plays a role, or do you think it's the hard stances that either one of the presidential candidates, of course, we know obviously that would be Kamala Harris for the Democratic side of the House, and also Donald Trump for the Republican side of the House. Do you think it's personalities, a stance, or has social media sort of slapped that in our face now where we can't escape it?
Also overexposure. You can't get away from it. You know, you're constantly being barraged with all this information. And the language itself, I really feel like the language itself is incredibly inflammatory. So the one thing I want people to really realize is when they hear all this information that's coming at them and they take this into their body, they're having a physical reaction to that language. You can feel your shoulders rise. You can feel a knot in your stomach. There are all these ways that we actually feel it. And that's the first really successful acknowledgement for you to understand that those words are impacting you physically.
Yeah.
And for you to be able to stay calm in a situation with family, friends, coworkers, you have to recognize that in your body so you can at least step back and go, whoa, I need to breathe. I need to like find a place to be where I can be cool, contained, and I can hear without judgment and wait and make my body even tighter, because that's detrimental to your health. So that's step one.
Yeah. So that's powerful. So you're saying when we hear this language, and whatever language from the candidates or their surrogates, right? Because let's be real, a lot of times it's not necessarily the candidate themselves, but it's individuals that are coming on that are saying their opinion. They're saying, well, this is what he stands for, and that's what she stands for. And there are words, buzzwords that are used, right? That certainly can inflame emotions in us. And I want to say this, rhetoric and language is important to many people for many reasons. And I will say this, and call me a Girl Scout, and I happen to have been a Girl Scout most of my childhood, and I love that experience. But words do matter, Karen. They do. And when we hear words that inflame, that are mean, that are insulting, from if it's the candidate themselves or if it's a surrogate, it gets people riled up. How do you suggest we hear the words? Maybe we find them offensive. Maybe someone could say they're racist or sexist, they're homophobic, words that can offend a lot of people. How do we process it without sitting in the kitchen, getting angry and raising our blood pressure for individuals, frankly, that don't know us and will never know us?
So, it helps to be an observer. So, that the instinct, the human instinct is to engage in that conversation. But if you can step back and you can realize the situation that you're in, and you've created your own words to use. So instead of saying moron or moronic, like you just sit back and go, well, that's one way of looking at it. That's interesting. I say that's interesting to the television a lot because I do immerse myself in this pretty much throughout the day. I'm just such a junkie, but I have learned to use words in my head, to take some of those words that I tend to use and not use them and replace them with my word wall words, which really helps me be in the moment and not be reactive, because we're in a really inflamed society right now. And the goal is, I believe the goal is to actively engage everyone in a discourse that is discordant. So it's up to us to find our voices and to find our self of sense and to stay calm in those moments, like we would if we were in some sort of traffic accident.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a moving traffic accident every day. So think about it that way and find the words that work for you to be. When it was just two men running, I decided to call them, two presidential wives, Martha Washington and Mary Todd Lincoln. And then people didn't know who to be mad at. It was a great strategy for me, and it would just throw people off. Now I'm just having to sit back and say, that's one way of looking at it. And then we can go further and say, this is one election. The inflammation you're talking about on social media makes it sound like the world is going to end. Okay. It's not.
Okay. And so I think what you're saying is great information to really keep in mind how much we're processing, how much we're allowing it to take over our psyche. Let me ask you this, Karen. It's a fair question. Does that mean that at some point we may have to cut off the television or say, okay, and I'm the biggest advocate of allowing people to be informed, but is it there a point right now where we say, hey, I've had enough of the rhetoric. I've had enough of the conversation for today. Let me cut off the television or this political topic for the next few hours. Is that a fair assessment of our own selves?
That's just self-care.
Okay.
Everybody should practice self-care throughout the day. I recommend that people get up in the morning and do this before your feet hit the ground. Design your mood for the day. So I would love to be peaceful all day, every day, 365 days a year. That is my goal. And if I can't do it before my feet hit the floor, I do it when I'm walking the dog. I'm out and I'm like consciously saying, what is my mood today? So when my mood leaves peaceful, and I can tell that by how I feel it in my gut, then I know that I have left my peaceful mood. And that's when I turn off the TV, right? So I give myself a break. So you really do have to continue to check in throughout the day if you're as caught up in it as many of us are. Some people manage to go through this and not be 100% engaged. I'm just not one of those people. Okay. So I'm constantly manic, but I have on many an occasion in the last month turned the TV off. So I highly recommend that. And I really encourage people to design their mood through the day. And you know what? If you can't remember what it was, just put a rubber band around your wrist, write it on a sticky note on your computer, put it in lipstick on your mirror and say peaceful. And then you can remind yourself that that's how you want to feel in your body.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And you're right. There are times when you just have to step back and step away because obviously we want to stay informed. We want to be empowered with information. But if you're getting to a point where you're upset and you're irritated with yourself or with the TV, or you want to throw something at the TV, then maybe it is time to step back and protect your peace at all costs, because we can want to stay informed with our brain, right, Karen? But we certainly want our bodies to be at ease and not frantic, not going through anxiety, not having panic attacks. Again, I do want to put things in perspective for two individuals that are running for the major political parties that do not know you. And I'm going to be real, likely you will never meet. And I've got to be real about it.
Very true. Yeah. Very true. I mean, we have to really be able to reframe these things that are happening to us, right? We need to be able to turn a corner and be more productive. Like, understand that while this is extremely important to all of us, this is, as you said earlier in the opening, this is one election. Reframe this to know that when something happens, and it will happen, and someone will be elected, there are still 535 people in the city of Washington, D.C. that will have to be able to make decisions. And we've begun to realize how difficult that is for them. The world will not come to an end. And all of those elections up and down the ballot are equally important, whether it's your city council, your PTA. We've learned that most rarely do we see a politician ascend to the top without having those local connections and that relationship with voters. It's all equally important. So don't rest your sanity and your health on one election.
Yeah, such a great point. And I do certainly want to say, and I said this before I echoed, that municipality elections or the ballot questions or referendums certainly do matter as well. And I'm not by any means saying the presidential election doesn't count, because it does, right? I was a reporter, it certainly does. But I certainly want to say, and this is not a political statement, the world is not going to come to an end either way, whoever gets elected on November the 6th. That's not to say that by all means I'm not dismissing important issues and topics. I'm an informed voter as well. So there are certainly things that matter, and you should vote for items that matter to you. But at the end of the day, you have to put things in perspective. And you know this, Karen, just as much as I do. There are old adages out there that simply say, where you are in this moment, it matters, but will it matter a year from now? Psychologically, will it matter? And did you put yourself into a frenzy, run your blood pressure out, have breakouts, have rashes? Again, for things that may not necessarily be something that maybe is important to you 2 or 3 years down the line. And I say this being a proud member of media, being an independent media outlet. I'm very proud of it. We do great reporting and good work. With that being said, and I know, Karen, that the word sensationalism does exist. And there are certain outlets that capitalize on that. That's what they do. And you have to be mindful that you're not falling victim until a game of ratings, until a game of tuning in or sharing things that may not be the healthiest, where you can look back, and I'm saying this, not you, well, we can look back 30 years from now and saying, I'm proud I shared that post. that's something I would not be ashamed of, or that I want my grandchildren to know my grandmother shared that post, not in the moment and getting riled up. Karen, this is an engaging conversation. We are talking about presidential election anxiety. There's so much going on. We know both major parties, be it the RNC or the DNC, just wrapped up their conventions. We know the DNC did. And so there's a lot of chatter out there on both sides of the aisle, and a lot of times those ones in the middle as well. So this conversation is going. We certainly got some good afternoons. Thank you, Angela out of Atlanta. She's saying good afternoon, ladies. We've got Stacy out of Atlanta. Thank you. We have Mr. Moore as well. Thank you, Mr. Moore, for saying good afternoon to us. And Stacy out of Atlanta Metro has a comment. She says, I agree with you. We have to take a step back from social media and the name bashing. I've got to ask you this really quick, Karen. Take a step back in the name bashing. I talked about psychologically removing yourself from it, but what do you do? And this is going to be the tough question. We got to address the elephant in the room before we get out of here, Karen. What do you do as a human being when you've got to face colleagues, co-workers that want to pull you into that conversation, or your own father, your mother, your neighbor? Hey, you're the person you're dating. What do you do when they want to talk about it and you say, okay, I'm cutting off the TV from now, I'm controlling myself, and then you pick up the phone and you go out for coffee with your guy or your girl, and they're bringing it right back up, and you can feel the emotions. There are a lot of people
feel it, right?
that feels it coming back up. What do you do when it's the other person? It's not necessarily your inside psyche doing it.
Well, I think that's when you can really become an observer. I think you really have to sort of sit back and almost have that shield, so it's bouncing off you and you're not taking it in. And as you're doing that, you can actually be empathetic with the person in terms of their level of upset around this. So that's when you can start to use language that I'm choosing not to be upset in this moment, so I'm not going to respond. If you need to speak this, I'm here to listen for a minute and a half, and then we're going to move on. Yeah. So I think you can establish boundaries with your conversations. I think people should establish boundaries with their conversations, whether it's duration, topic matter. And what I really am asking people to do is really take care of their own physical self so that they can be there when it really matters. Because we're all going to wander into these conversations, and it's just going to take some time for it is going to end, right? It's going to end. So if you don't want your relationships to end, you want to spend time with your grandparents and your parents, eating dinner, set some ground rules. Just say, this is the way it's going to be. We've lived through this before, and now we're not going to live through this because these are our ground rules. Mm-hmm. And let's agree that these are the rules that we're going to play by in our conversations and our dinners and our socialization. And at work, I think it's even more important because I think you're crossing the line at work in terms of engaging people in those conversations. And I think people can speak their voice on that. Just say simply, I'm not interested in having a conversation like that in the office. Yeah. And don't, everybody's looking to have their time, right? They all want their 2 minutes to be able to speak. It's for a different day.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. I do agree with the work environment. If you have your independent entrepreneur or solopreneur, whatever it is, I will say this, even if your client or if it's someone you work with want to engage and pull you in, I think you have a great point. Let them vent, let them talk about it. And sometimes gracefully, and I've done this on many occasions, there's nothing to say. Well, okay, let's move forward. Let's move to another topic. Because if you agree or disagree, it may not be the environment to go there. Because again, I've seen with this presidential election and previous ones, but this one seems to be very unique and distinctive, that you're not really going to get anywhere, perhaps, having an argument with your coworker in the next cubicle. I'm not sure that's going to solve anything. And you've got to ask yourself sometimes, and I say this as a journalist, Karen, are you really going to convince me of your way of thinking for your candidate? Let's go there. That's a big plausibility that's likely not going to happen.
It's interesting because I think what we need to realize is that we're so used to sort of instant gratification in our society these days, courtesy of social media. But what I would sort of challenge people to think about is this. We're in this for the long game. The reason I do the work that I do for the Organic and Natural Health Association is because I believe in serving 7 generations. So I would like to honor the 3 generations that got me to where I am today. And I'd like to serve the 3 that I may never know who are coming by living in the moment in this time. So I'm not interested in solving world problems. I mean, I'm an advocate, right? And I do this work for organic and natural, but I do it for the longer vision of it. There are estimates that this election will be decided by 50 to 60,000 people in 4 to 5 states. Now, I don't know if that holds true today. We'll find out at the end of the day. But if that is the case, then all of us should spend our hard work and our time and our love taking care of the largest community that we possibly can and not doing battle one-on-one.
And such a great point. Like you're saying, the battle one-on-one, the Mortal Kombat, if you will, I'll quote my kids, is that really going to be definitive either way? Or are you going to have tense moments now with your colleague next door in your cubicle? We have a question. Thank you, Chutney out of Atlanta Metro. He says, how do you handle things not going your way with an election? That's a great question, right? I mean, we're seeing the numbers, we're seeing the polls. For this particular one, it seems to be a very, very tight race coming down to the last hour. But yeah, perhaps you're a huge fan of one over the other, and you can't believe it's going to be a tight race. You don't want to hear any of that. Perhaps you didn't like the RNC convention and the speeches that were made, or watching the DNC riled you up a lot. How do you handle it when it doesn't go your way? Because I know we talked about watching the TV, but let's also talk about the polls or driving around and seeing billboards or signs or rallies. I've been caught in several rallies before, driving or walking. I'm having a peaceful time with my family and friends, and then you see something that can ignite it. He's got a great question. How do you handle that?
It's like any time when you want to be upset. Like I was recently upset over something and got caught. And it's like, I have a choice. Every time I get upset, I have a choice.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to get upset every time the polls don't go my way, imagine what my body's going to feel like. I'm going to end up with an ulcer at the end of this.
Yeah.
And that is exactly how people get ulcers. You talked about high blood pressure and everything else. I feel like people don't understand that they do have a choice. So anytime one of these things happens, anytime the poll doesn't go your way, first of all, it's a temporary situation.
That's right.
Second, it can be debated 2 or 3 ways. Nothing is black and white in our world anymore.
Good point.
And what do you accomplish? How do you serve those 7 generations by letting a poll disturb your focus, your ability to communicate well, your position, if that's what you choose to do, and your sense of calm and serenity to get you more happiness in life? Yeah. So it's really a choice, and it really goes back to that sort of reframing how you want to be in the world. Yeah, I like to watch polls too, but for the last 3 months, all the polls have been in the margin of error, which means it's a tie.
Yes.
So let's be real. We don't know how good these polls are, and that's just information that's coming at you that you have an opportunity to take in and reframe the way you want to.
Correct. Absolutely. And Karen, I think you and I have lived long enough, my friend, where we have seen polls go either way, and there's been shocks on either side of the house. So great question, Chutney out of Atlanta. We certainly appreciate you. Horace out of Atlanta Metro said, great point. He said, people are attracted more to positive versus negative. Thank you so much, Mr. Moore, for bringing that up. Karen, from your professional opinion, is that true? I've got a few opinions on that as a journalist, but I'll let you take that away.
I mean, I think we're watching some of that now, and I'm really intrigued with that. I am always attracted more to a positive than I am a negative, because I am the kind of person who wants to do work in the world, like good work in the world. So I am that kind of human being. Now, I can go in certain parts of the country when I travel home, and I can find myself with people like that who literally will wear somebody's hat and just wait for me to come out so they can show me their hat. So it's like, okay, that's childish and kind of amusing. But I think that, being able to take information in and be extremely, not selective, but judicious in terms of your interpretation of that information. And it may not always be the way you want it to be, but know that it's just a moment in time. And this is going to be a roller coaster. I don't see this between now and the election date leveling out. I see this continually being an up and down. And that's why I think, being able to sort of set your mood for the day and just really like you're a horse with blinders on. Sometimes when you have to have things, you have to get things done, is important.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I'll say this. I certainly the kind of person I am personally, professionally. I love positive stories. And here at Let's Talk America Podcast Radio, we aim to deliver solutions. I will say that I think it really depends on the person, because you and I have both seen this in the news cycle. There are negative stories or posts on social media that have gone viral that aren't that positive, that don't really offer a solution. Horace, I thank you for that. I would love to think that positivity sells. And I think for some informed voters it does. But I certainly think when we look back over the history of the world, the political history, Karen, I'm sure you would agree with me, there are individual circumstances where they have been straight dictator, mean-spirited tyrants, who did have listeners and followers to theirs. Now, by all means, I'm not speaking about anybody in our presidential cycle. I'm very objective about this presidential cycle here on Let's Talk America podcast. But I am talking about when we think of things, unfortunately, of Adolf Hitler, right? Who we all can agree, I hope, was a monster. But we also know there were individuals who did follow this individual, who endorsed the horrific activities that he dictated and allowed and pushed and orchestrated to happen. And so when I look back on the history of humankind, right, and proud to be human, no other way out there to be. But unfortunately, we can go thousands of years back. We don't have to go to just World War II with Hitler. We can go thousands of years back where we know there are factual things of just cruel intentions. And yet there are people, Karen, right? This isn't a political statement. There are people that give thumbs up or turn a blind eye. I'm fascinated with political history and where not only the United States, but other countries have failed when it does come to conflicts and wars, and what obviously we choose to be attentive to, and things that we very well know, and that's countries, nations, communities, and people, right, Karen, where we can turn a blind eye to. So I want to think that. I think the work that I do on this podcast contributes to that. But I think, unfortunately, the world history has not always taught us that positivity is what some individuals want. Because, right, this isn't a political statement either, but I think sometimes people are looking for people to blame for whatever is going on in their life, or to really to accept rhetoric that sometimes fits the bill. And I will say this, some individuals will tell you that's been on both sides of the major aisles over the years. But I certainly will say that negativity can sell based on maybe the individual and what resonates with them. Your thoughts, Karen?
Well, there's always going to be suffering in the world. There was always going to be suffering in the world. And whether it's caused by external forces or nature, but there will always be suffering in the world. And that we must manage. In this case, upset truly is optional. And we can control that element of what we know and do, and help the people around us by being that living example. And yes, there will be despots for, decades and generations to come. Fortunately, in the United States, it seems to still be working. But I don't, and I never want to underestimate what people are going through in terms of genuine suffering, and our obligations to the world and its people to be able to help that, for sure. And I think the United States has a really good track record with that. So again, instead of looking at this as the doomsday election, understand this is our moment in time. We may like the outcome, we may not like the outcome, but it is a moment in time.
Yes.
And it's 4 years.
Yeah.
So we've been around over 250, so we are aware and responsible as citizens, even if we don't like what each other say.
Yeah. Such a great conversation, important time. And when you are watching Let's Talk America Podcast Radio, I'm Shana, your on-air host and your executive producer. I'm speaking with the one and only best-selling author, and also advocate and industry expert, speaking with Karen Howard. We're talking about election anxiety. Unless you've been living under a rock or you happen to be 2 years old as a toddler, right? You know that there's a presidential election going on. We have two candidates that have emerged out of the field for the major parties. I think it's fair to say, no matter matter how you may feel about independent candidates, one of the two will be president, the next commander in chief of the United States of America, the nation that, of course, Let's Talk America podcast is out of. And we are talking about, again, the presidential election. We're not taking sides. We're not picking. I'm not making any predictions. That's not the business that we're into here on Let's Talk America. But we are in the business of addressing things and concerns that matter to you. And what we aim to do is provide solutions. And we want your questions, your comments, your thoughts. And we do ask, because this conversation can be certainly considered political for some, we ask that you keep it friendly, of course, and courteous. We certainly ask that you not use profanity when you speak of any of the political candidates or ideologies. That's what we ask here of Let's Talk America podcast. Karen, I want to go more dig into what else can we do to make sure that anxiety is intact, because there are other things that are competing as well. I did want to mention Stacey out of Atlanta. Stacey, thank you so much. She mentions, Karen, that one of my colleagues said that people have been getting fired for what they post on social media and say in the office. But I haven't seen this in my workplace and into regard to the election, not just in general. So she's talking obviously about this presidential election, people feeling very polarized one way or the other. They're putting it on social media. What are your thoughts on that, Karen?
That is not anything that I have heard, but it wouldn't surprise me. Getting fired, there would probably be some sort of legal course that someone could take related to that. But I'm not a lawyer. I just play one at home. But but I think it's a really good example for the dramatic nature of what we're talking about in terms of people's reaction. And I think, that ability to not be reactive. Think about this. Think about being in the car and somebody cutting you off. So like road rage. And this happened to me. It's actually in the book where I was sitting at a light, talking to my daughter on speakerphone, not with my phone, and I get hit from behind. And I look up and the guy at a stoplight, and the guy's like losing his mind. He's really upset. And I'm like, what just happened? So, you get to pick the way you react to that.
Yes.
And you're going to read something that is going to inflame you enough that you're going to put your own reputation and your livelihood by responding.
Powerful.
I would say that's a real good time to step back and say, I need to reframe. I need to choose not to be upset. And if I could have, just a couple of things like for takeaways, is like, I really do want people to understand this is a choice. Count to 5, count to 10 before you react, just based on something that's inflamed you and turned your body into a little type, not.
Yeah, I think you make a very valid point of, I guess you're saying that knee-jerk reaction, if we can have some discipline on that. And obviously freedom of speech, people have the right. That's what social media exists. We're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube now. So shout out to social media platforms have changed the game completely. But Karen, I guess you're saying, let's use a little bit of common sense here as well. And of course there can be legal action taken, but I guess you're saying that the knee-jerk reaction, just make sure it's something that you have thought through. If you opt to get involved in rhetoric that really could seem controversial, is that what you're saying?
I would do. If you really feel like the need to communicate something and get it off your chest, do it on your, handwrite it. Do it in a way that you really have to think about what you're doing. And as you write it, actually think about what you're doing and how it feels in your body. Because this is not your ability to do this in a flash. Don't think it has any less impact on you physically, because words have reaction in your body all the time. When people speak to you in a love language, you feel very different than when you're hearing somebody talk to you about politics. Keep that in mind and make your choices more wisely in terms about how you want to, just count to 10. Don't be in that reactive mode. Just be in your body and be quiet and calm as much as you can. And when you feel that you have lost that sense of calm, get out of the room. Go take that deep breath. Go find that 30 seconds, that minute, that hour you need to bring yourself, whatever it is, take that time and you'll never regret that time.
And I think something to point out, obviously, I don't want to suppress what they're saying is my freedom of speech. I feel this way about him or her so adamantly. I've got to put this information out. I will certainly say this: if you're supposed to be working from 7 to 4 or 7 to 3 or 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. I think, obviously you're allocated a lunch break in most cases, but I would be mindful of posting 7 to 20 times a day when
Yeah.
you're supposed to be working. I mean, I think you can have certainly freedom of speech, but there's certainly obligations or responsibility as a team member that you're also having, and to be mindful, are you becoming consumed with it, right? I guess, Karen, you'd agree probably that there's a difference between posting once a day and you're posting 20 times a day. Where is your focus? Because I'm going to point this out, you've got to pay rent,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So nobody's going to take care of you because you voted for them. Nobody's sitting there saying,
say that again, Karen.
Nobody's going to take care of you because you voted for them. They're not over there keeping track of how many times you're posting and reposting to them. You're not going to get, you don't get to vote extra times. You get one vote. And so you need to be, and just think about the people around you, right?
Yeah.
We have a dramatic impact when we walk in a room. You come on the radio and you light up, and people's lives light up. That's a great way to be. So we can't all be like that 24/7. I understand, but just know that the trickle down effect is real.
Yeah, very. And what, again, let's go here. Individuals that don't know you and will never know you. Not saying their issues don't matter. By all means, it's not what I'm saying. I'm an empowered voter. I encourage everyone to have a voice in democracy that we hear in the USA. But certainly just be mindful when you go personal, when you hit low, do they even know you? And I hate to put it so basic, but we've got to put it on a level where people can understand. Stacy said this, say it again. And I think she's talking about the comment of no one's going to take care of you if you voted for them, right?
Right. Right.
Such a great point. Such a great conversation, Karen. Speaking with the one and only Karen Howard, of course, best-selling author. She does some great work, and advocate as well, expert in her industry. Anything else before we wrap up this conversation, Karen, that we should be aware of when it comes to election anxiety? Because again, this presidential election, we don't have much more time before it will conclude, and we'll know our verdict certainly probably later that night of November the 6th throughout this country, throughout the world. And the world is watching. So many people are watching. But what should we keep in mind? Because and I know with the wrap up of the other major parties convention, there's going to be a lot of energy coming from both sides, and also some down the middle for the next 60 days or so that we've got left. I think it's technically 70 something days that we have, but it will go like that.
I'm going to just remind people that deep breathing is the way that people get things done. You can't play an instrument unless you know how to breathe from your belly. You can't swim unless you breathe from your belly. You can't do what these Olympians have just done and made us so proud of our country unless you know how to breathe from your belly, not from your chest. And when you get in that space, I want you all to sit back in your chairs and just breathe. And just every single time you find yourself going to that spot, deep breathe, deep breathe. And that's a belly breath. Make your stomach move, because it'll change your physical reaction instantaneously.
Yeah, such a great point. And you're saying breathe through your, I love that, because it's keeping yourself calm, it's keeping yourself relatable. And also thinking, can I say this for those who may have some anxiety pre-existing, right? We've had experts come on and say, also take in the moment and remember be where you are, and not so much on what you're watching and, like you brought up, scared of what's going to happen in the future. Because we've also had psychologists come on this show and saying what you're so fearful of likely will never happen anyway.
One election, one day, one term. That's all you can take care of in the moment, right? So you've got a lot of obligations that have lasting impact. Your work, your family, your religion. These things have lasting impact on the people you love, the people you work with. Our ability to impact the world in one election is not going to end the day. It's just, there will be a tomorrow.
Yeah. There will be a tomorrow, I guess, remembering to be positive. I think I want to recap what you said, Karen, about being careful of the language that's igniting, that's inflaming us. May we also remember to step away if we need to. And for the family and friends, if Papa or Granny or Grandma wants to call and talk about it, and it's messing with your psyche, Karen brought up a great point. take it in for about a minute or a half, as long as you can, and say, okay, we're gonna, let's move on to another topic. Or, Karen, I'm going to say this, I'm not a therapist and I don't play one on TV, but I am a parent. So I will say that perhaps also maybe being expressive and transparent with that family or friend or love interest of saying, this topic really doesn't sit well with me emotionally. And if you don't mind, if we could sort of not talk about it. Is that a fair conversation to have?
It is absolutely fair. It is absolutely fair. And in some relationships that's not going to go over well, but you're putting your boundaries up, and it's great for you to be in a situation where you're not reacting, but it's also unfair for somebody to continue to unload on you, right? So at some point you're going to have to establish some boundaries with family and friends. Thanksgiving, make a rule: no politics at the table.
That's wise. That's why this election will be over, but it will be fresh on the minds of individuals, whatever the outcome will be come Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I don't expect this to go away overnight. I think that the election is that day, and I would also say to your listeners, it will impact your holidays. So I've already watched us do that a couple of times, and I don't want people to suffer like that anymore. Mm-hmm. So whether it's a birthday tomorrow or a holiday in 3 months, we're still going to be living it. And it may not get better, or it might, but we all have to learn how to be together and show respect and love.
That's right. And the real world does exist. As much as we have boundaries, like you're saying, we put up those rail guards, but we do have to walk in a world, because there's going to be a winner come November the 7th, right? November the 6th is the election. Is going to be a winner. And either way, we have to prepare our psyche. If our candidate doesn't win, we've got to prepare the psyche, and also just hope for the best, right? Whatever that may be for you out there, but also plan for reality that your candidate may not win. But you're going to wake up. You're still going to be the best version you can do. And Karen, to your point, no matter where you fall on the aisle, whatever work is important to you, that doesn't stop that. So you keep pushing and keep going.
7 generations, not just this one.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to keep going, and we're going to live to keep seeing the world and keep all these memories on us, whatever's going to happen with it, and do the work that needs to be done. Karen Howard, such a pleasure to have you on Let's Talk America podcast. It was our first time speaking with you. Love your energy, love your advocacy, love your expertise as well. We love that you offering solutions as well. Before you head out of here, we've got to know, lady, where can our viewers, international and national viewers, find you out there, and any last tidbits?
Upsetisoptional.com. The book is available there through Amazon. And you can always check in on the organicandnaturalhealth.org website, organicandnatural.org, and see what we're up to there. We do a lot of consumer advocacy for things like, let's get some vitamin D in the SNAP program. So we're doing good work all over the place.
I love it. And the name of your book again?
Upset is Optional.
Upset is Optional. I love it. And it's talking about politics.
Oh, it's actually life stories too. It's like, we don't just get upset over presidential candidates in our lives.
Karen, what? You mean humans have a history of getting upset with each other?
We're very practiced at getting upset, I can tell you.
About anything. I'll say this as a tidbit for those out there: getting upset about things day to day may not be as easy as it is, but I guess sometimes you got to learn to let go as well, right, Karen? There are things you can't. Let go.
Relationships depend on that, and there's stories about me and my mom, and there's great examples in the book about why these practices make a difference in your life. There's also a cool one, I'll tease it up for you, which is a request versus a demand. Learn how to make a request. You're always making demands. That one can change a marriage.
Wow. Sounds like some wise world pearls of wisdom there. Karen Howard, thank you for being a guest on Let's Talk America, our podcast. I'm Shana. Karen, we're going to sign off. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. We do ask that you continue to share this episode. Go back. It's on replay. You can watch it on YouTube or Facebook. For our Facebookers, if you've got family and friends that have been so riled up about this election, or in 3 weeks you're saying, okay, she needs to take a chill pill, perhaps, we ask that you certainly share it. You can go on YouTube. If they're saying they don't have a Facebook account, they're standing against that, they can certainly watch it on YouTube as well. Stay informed, stay empowered. As Karen said, I'm going to echo this: whatever happens November the 6th, we're going to stay informed, we're going to stay empowered. Okay, either way, how you file on the aisle doesn't matter to me as much as it matters that you stay informed about yourself. That's your physical body, that's your emotional body, that's your having your faith, whatever it is that you have, stay with it and stick with it and stay informed with Let's Talk America podcast. For everyone, stay tuned. More great segments coming your way. We've got so much more for you before November the 6th, so stay with us. Thanks, Karen.
Thank
and
you.
thank you, everyone, for watching. And thank you so much. We had some feedback from Mr. Moore out of Atlanta. He said, thanks, good talk. We appreciate you. And stay tuned. More coming your way, everyone. Stay informed because we offer real talk for real people. And guess what? That's you. Thanks, everyone.